The scream that tore through the night was the kind that made even hardened men flinch, and when it finally died into silence, Sarah Whitmore knew her baby was gone before the midwife even turned around with tears streaming down her weathered face. The small room above the mercantile in Redemption, Colorado, smelled of blood and lavender oil, the lamp flickering shadows across walls that seemed to close in tighter with each passing second. Sarah lay back against the sweat-soaked pillow, her dark hair plastered to her forehead, her body trembling from exhaustion and a grief so profound, it felt like someone had reached inside her chest and hollowed her out completely. The midwife, Mrs. Henderson, wrapped the tiny, still form in a clean white cloth, her lips moving in what might have been a prayer, but Sarah heard nothing except the roaring silence where a baby's cry should have been. "I am so sorry, child," Mrs. Henderson whispered, her voice breaking. "Sometimes the Lord has reasons we cannot understand." Sarah did not want to hear about the Lord's reasons. She wanted to hear her daughter cry. She had felt the baby move just yesterday, felt those little kicks against her ribs that had made her smile even through the loneliness of the past months. Her husband Thomas had been dead for half a year, killed in a mining accident up in the mountains, and this baby had been all she had left of him. Now even that was gone. "Can I hold her?" Sarah asked, her voice barely audible. Mrs. Henderson hesitated, then nodded, bringing the small bundle to Sarah's arms. The baby was perfect, so perfect it seemed impossible that she was not breathing. Tiny fingers, a button nose, wisps of dark hair like Thomas had. Sarah traced one finger along the baby's cheek, feeling the coolness of the skin, and something inside her shattered into pieces so small she knew they could never be put back together. "I will fetch the pastor," Mrs. Henderson said quietly, "and I will make the arrangements." Sarah nodded numbly. Arrangements. Such a clean, simple word for something so devastating. The midwife left, closing the door softly behind her, and Sarah was alone with her dead daughter in a room that felt like a tomb. The night pressed against the single window, dark and vast, and she wondered how the world could just keep turning when hers had stopped completely. She did not know how long she sat there, holding the baby, whispering all the things she had planned to say over a lifetime into the span of minutes. She told her about Thomas, about how he had laughed and how his eyes crinkled at the corners, about the little house they had planned to build, about all the dreams that now lay scattered like ashes. Her voice gave out eventually, replaced by tears that came in waves, each one pulling her further into a darkness she was not sure she wanted to escape. The hours crawled by. Somewhere below, she heard the sounds of the town settling for the night, horses being led to the livery, the distant notes of a piano from the saloon down the street. Life continuing on as if nothing had changed, as if her entire world had not just collapsed. She wanted to scream at them all to stop, to be silent, to acknowledge that something terrible had happened, but she had no strength left for anger, only grief, vast and consuming, when Mrs. Henderson returned near midnight with the pastor. They took the baby gently, promising Sarah she would have a proper burial in the morning. Sarah let them take her daughter, feeling the weight leave her arms and knowing she would feel that absence for the rest of her life. They tried to make her drink some tea, tried to get her to lie down and rest, but she shook her head. How could she rest? How could she close her eyes when all she would see was that perfect, still face? Eventually they left, the pastor promising to return at first light. Sarah heard their footsteps descend the outside stairs, heard Mrs. Henderson's voice drift up, low and concerned, talking to someone. Then silence again, except for the wind that had picked up, whistling through the cracks in the walls. October in Colorado could be cold, and this night seemed determined to prove it. Sarah pulled a shawl around her shoulders but felt no warmth. She wondered if she would ever feel warm again. She moved to the window, looking out at the main street of Redemption. The town was small, barely more than a collection of wooden buildings clinging to existence on the edge of the frontier. It was 1876, and Colorado was still rough territory, still finding its footing between the old ways and the new. Sarah and Thomas had come here 2 years ago with such hope, such certainty that they could build a life. Now Thomas was buried on a hillside, and their daughter would join him there. The thought made her knees weak, and she sank down beside the window, her back against the wall, staring out at the darkness. She should lie down, should try to sleep, but the bed where she had labored and lost her child felt impossible to return to. So she sat, hugging her knees to her chest, feeling the emptiness inside her like a physical wound. She did not hear the footsteps on the outside stairs at first, too lost in her own misery. But then there was a soft knock on the door, hesitant, and a man's voice, low and uncertain. "Ma'am, Mrs. Henderson asked me to check on you, said you should not be alone." Sarah closed her eyes. She did not want company, did not want someone trying to offer comfort when there was none to be had. She wanted to be left alone with her grief, to sink into it until it swallowed her whole. The knock came again, a little more insistent. "Ma'am, I know you probably want to be left be, but I gave my word I would make sure you were all right." Something in the voice made her look up. It was not pushy or demanding, just steady and kind. She recognized it vaguely as belonging to one of the cowboys who worked the ranches outside of town, though she could not place which one. In the month since Thomas died, she had kept to herself mostly, working in the mercantile below to pay for this room, existing in a fog of grief and pregnancy and exhaustion. "I am fine," she called out, though her voice cracked on the words, betraying the lie. There was a pause. "Then, with all respect, ma'am, I do not think that is true. And I do not feel right leaving you alone up here. I will just sit outside the door if you prefer, but Mrs. Henderson was mighty worried, and I promised." Sarah felt tears sting her eyes again. Part of her wanted to tell him to go away, to leave her to her misery. But another part, a very small part, was terrified of being alone, of spending the entire night in this room with nothing but her thoughts and her loss. She pushed herself to her feet, her body aching from the labor, and went to the door. She opened it just a crack, peering out. The man standing there was tall, lean in the way of men who spent their lives working hard and eating little. He had dark hair that needed cutting, a few days' worth of stubble on his jaw, and eyes that were a startling blue even in the dim light from the lamp inside her room. He held his hat in his hands, turning it by the brim, and his expression was gentle, concerned. "I am Cole Brennan," he said quietly. "I work out at the Double J Ranch. Mrs. Henderson said you had a terrible loss tonight and she did not want you alone. I am sorry for intruding, ma'am, but I gave her my word." Sarah stared at him, trying to process his words through the fog in her mind. She vaguely remembered seeing him around town, always polite, always keeping to himself. He had kind eyes, she noticed, sad eyes like he knew something about loss himself. "You should not have to sit here," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I am fine." "Begging your pardon, ma'am, but you do not look fine." His voice was gentle but firm. "I will not intrude on your privacy, but I would feel better if I could just sit nearby. Make sure you have what you need." Sarah wanted to argue, but she was so tired, so impossibly tired. And the thought of spending the whole night alone suddenly seemed unbearable. She nodded slowly, stepping back to let him in. He entered quietly, his movements careful, as if he was afraid of disturbing something fragile. He looked around the small room, taking in the rumpled bed, the basin of water still pink-tinged, the lamp burning low on the table. "I can sit here," he said, gesturing to a chair near the door. "You should try to rest, ma'am." "Sarah," she said, her voice hollow. "My name is Sarah." "Sarah," he repeated, and somehow the way he said it made her feel a little less alone. "I am truly sorry for your loss." She nodded, not trusting herself to speak. She went back to her spot by the window, sinking down against the wall again. Cole settled into the chair, setting his hat on the table beside him. For a long moment they sat in silence, the only sound the wind outside and the occasional creak of the building settling. "I lost a daughter too," Cole said quietly, so quietly she almost thought she had imagined it. 3 years ago, she was only 2 years old. Fever took her in the space of a night. Sarah looked up at him, startled. His face was turned slightly away, but she could see the pain etched in the lines around his eyes and mouth. "I am sorry," she whispered. He nodded slowly. "Her mother, my wife, she passed too. Same fever. I was out on a cattle drive, and by the time I got back, they were already gone." He was quiet for a moment, then added, "I am not telling you this to make you feel worse or to compare sorrows. I just wanted you to know that I understand a little of what you are feeling, and I know how terrible it is to face that alone." Something in Sarah's chest loosened just slightly. She had felt so isolated in her grief, so certain that no one could possibly understand the depth of this loss. But here was this stranger, this cowboy who had his own scars, offering her the gift of knowing she was not alone in her pain. "What was her name?" Sarah asked, her voice soft. "Emma," Cole said, and his voice caught slightly on the name. "She had red hair like her mother, and she loved horses. Used to beg me to take her out to see the foals every spring." Sarah felt fresh tears slide down her cheeks. "I never got to know my daughter," she said, the words torn from somewhere deep inside. "She never even took a breath. I do not know what her voice would have sounded like, or what would have made her laugh. I will never know any of those things." Cole was quiet for a moment, and then he rose from his chair and crossed the room. He hesitated just a few feet away, then slowly sank down to sit on the floor beside her, his back against the wall. Not touching, but close enough that she could feel his presence, solid and warm. "I am sorry," he said again, and the simple words held a weight of understanding that no flowery speech could have matched. They sat like that for a while, side by side in the dim lamplight, two people who had lost everything that mattered sitting vigil together. Sarah found herself talking, the words spilling out in fragments and rushes. She told him about Thomas, about their dreams for the future, about feeling the baby move and imagining what kind of person she would become. She told him about the loneliness of the past months, about working herself to exhaustion in the mercantile, trying not to think about how alone she was. She told him things she had not told anyone, things she had barely admitted to herself. Cole listened without interrupting, without offering platitudes or trying to fix what could not be fixed. Sometimes he nodded, sometimes he just sat quietly, and somehow that was exactly what she needed. When she finally fell silent, exhausted from talking and crying, he spoke again. "The pain does not go away," he said softly. "I will not lie to you and say it does, but it changes over time, becomes something you can carry instead of something that crushes you. You learn to live with it, to make room for it alongside everything else." "I do not know how to do that," Sarah whispered. "I do not know how to keep going when everything feels so empty." "You do it one moment at a time," Cole said. "You get through the next minute and then the next, and eventually those minutes become hours and days. You do not have to know how to do the whole thing right now. You just have to keep breathing." Sarah turned to look at him, really look at him for the first time. His face was weathered from years in the sun, and there were lines around his eyes that spoke of both laughter and sorrow. He was probably in his early 30s, she guessed, though the hard life of a cowboy made ages difficult to determine. There was a steadiness to him, a quiet strength that made her feel just a little less adrift. "Why are you being so kind?" she asked. "You do not even know me." Cole was quiet for a moment, considering. "Because someone was kind to me when I needed it," he said finally. "After I lost Emma and Mary, my wife, I wanted to die, came real close to making that happen a few times. But there was an old rancher who gave me a job when I could barely function, who let me work through my grief and did not judge me for the times I broke down. He told me that the only way to honor the people we lost was to keep living, to keep finding moments of light even in the darkness. I figure I owe it to him and to them to pass that kindness on when I can." Sarah felt something shift inside her, some small crack in the wall of despair that had surrounded her. She was not alone. This man, this near stranger, understood what she was going through in a way that even well-meaning friends could not. And he was here, sitting beside her in the middle of the night, asking nothing in return. The hours passed slowly. Sometimes they talked, quietly sharing memories of the people they had lost. Sometimes they sat in silence, the kind of comfortable silence that comes when two people do not need words to communicate. Cole told her about the ranch where he worked, about the horses he trained and the wide open spaces of Colorado that he had come to love, despite the pain they held. Sarah found herself telling him about growing up in Missouri, about the journey west with Thomas, about all the small hopes and dreams that had died along with him and now their daughter. Somewhere around 3 in the morning, Sarah felt herself starting to shiver despite her shawl. The temperature had dropped even further, and the small stove in the corner had burned down to embers. Cole noticed immediately, standing up and moving to add more wood to the fire. When he came back, he hesitated, then carefully settled down beside her again, a little closer this time. "You are freezing," he observed quietly. "May I?" he gestured, asking permission before doing anything, and Sarah found herself nodding. Cole carefully draped his coat around her shoulders over her shawl, and the warmth of it, still carrying his body heat, made her realize just how cold she had gotten. "Thank you," she whispered. They fell quiet again, and Sarah felt exhaustion pulling at her like a tide. She had not slept in over 24 hours, and her body was demanding rest even as her mind resisted it. Her eyes kept drifting closed, only to snap open again as grief surged through her anew. "It is all right to rest," Cole said softly, noticing her struggle. "I will be right here." "You are not alone." Those words, simple as they were, broke something loose inside Sarah. She had been alone for so long, carrying everything by herself, and here was someone offering to share that burden even for just one night. Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks, but these felt different somehow, less like drowning and more like release. "I am scared," she admitted in a whisper. "Scared to close my eyes, scared of what comes next, scared of everything." "I know," Cole said, and his voice was infinitely gentle. "Fear is natural, but you do not have to face it alone, not tonight." Almost without thinking, Sarah found herself leaning into his shoulder, too exhausted and grief-stricken to worry about propriety or what anyone might think. Cole went very still for a moment, then carefully, tentatively, put his arm around her shoulders, offering support and warmth and the simple comfort of human contact. Sarah turned her face into his shoulder and cried great-wrenching sobs that shook her entire body, and Cole just held her, one hand gently rubbing her back in slow circles, murmuring quiet reassurances. "I have you," he said softly. "Let it out, I have you." Sarah cried until she had no tears left, until her body was empty of everything except exhaustion. Through it all, Cole held her steadily, never wavering, never pulling away. He was warm and solid and real, an anchor in the storm of her grief. When her sobs finally quieted to hitching breaths, he did not let go, just continued to hold her, giving her the space to fall apart knowing he would not judge her for it. "I do not know how to do this," Sarah whispered against his shoulder. "I do not know how to bury my baby tomorrow and then just go on living." "You do not have to know right now," Cole replied quietly. "Tomorrow will come whether we are ready or not, but you do not have to face it until then. Right now, you just need to get through tonight. Will you stay?" The words came out before Sarah could stop them, vulnerable and pleading. "Please do not leave me alone." "I will stay as long as you need me," Cole promised. "All night if you want. I am not going anywhere." Sarah felt herself relax slightly, some of the desperate fear easing its grip on her chest. She was so tired, so impossibly tired, and the warmth of Cole's embrace was the first thing that had penetrated the cold numbness inside her. Her eyelids grew heavy, and though part of her still fought against sleep, another part was too exhausted to resist any longer. "Close your eyes," Cole said softly. "I will keep watch. You are safe." Sarah let her eyes drift closed, her head still resting against Cole's shoulder. She expected sleep to be impossible, expected nightmares and waking in panic, but instead she found herself sinking into a deep, dark silence. The last thing she was aware of was Cole's arm around her, steady and protective, and the sound of his breathing, slow and even. Cole held Sarah through the darkest hours of the night, feeling the weight of her grief and exhaustion as she finally fell into restless sleep. Her face was streaked with tears even in sleep, and every so often she would make a small sound of distress that made his chest tighten. He knew that pain, remembered his own nights of waking up reaching for a daughter who was no longer there. The world could be unbearably cruel sometimes, and all anyone could do was try to be a light for someone else when they were drowning in darkness. He had been in town buying supplies when Mrs. Henderson had practically accosted him on the street, her face drawn with worry. She had told him about Sarah, about the stillborn baby, about how the young widow was all alone up there with no family and no one to sit with her through the night. Mrs. Henderson had to tend to her own family, and the pastor had other obligations, and she had looked at Cole with such pleading eyes that he could not have refused even if he had wanted to. Truth was, he had not wanted to refuse. He remembered Sarah vaguely from around town, always quiet, always keeping to herself, the sadness in her eyes visible even before tonight's tragedy. He knew what it was to lose everything, and he would not wish that on anyone, especially not to face it alone. As he sat there holding her, he found himself thinking about Mary and Emma, about the family he had lost. The pain had dulled over the years like he had told Sarah it would, but it never fully disappeared. He carried them with him always in the ache of his heart and the hollow spaces in his life. He had learned to live with it, but there were still nights when the loneliness threatened to swallow him whole. Maybe that was why he felt such a pull to help Sarah. Maybe it was a way of honoring the people he had lost, of making their deaths mean something by helping someone else through similar pain. Or maybe it was simpler than that. Maybe he just could not stand to see someone suffering when he had the power to offer even the smallest comfort. The night wore on toward dawn. Cole shifted carefully, trying not to wake Sarah as he adjusted his position to ease his cramping legs. She stirred slightly, making a small distressed sound, and he murmured reassurances until she settled again. Outside, the wind had died down, and the night had taken on that particular quality of stillness that comes just before sunrise. Cole found himself studying Sarah's face in the lamplight. She was pretty in a quiet way, with delicate features and dark lashes that lay against her tear-stained cheeks. She looked younger than he had realized, probably mid-20s at most, too young to have faced such loss. But then, loss did not care about age or fairness. It came when it came, and all anyone could do was endure. As the first gray light of dawn began to seep through the window, Sarah stirred more restlessly, her brow furrowing. Cole knew she was starting to wake, knew that she would have to face the harsh reality of the new day. He wished he could spare her that, could somehow make the pain less, but he knew from bitter experience that there were no shortcuts through grief. You had to walk through it, every painful step. Sarah's eyes opened slowly, confusion clouding them for a moment before memory crashed back in. Cole felt her entire body tense, saw the devastation sweep across her face like a physical blow. She pulled away from him slightly, looking disoriented, and he let her go, giving her space. "Morning," he said quietly. "How are you feeling?" It was a stupid question, and he knew it, but what else could he say? Sarah looked down at herself, at Cole's coat still draped around her shoulders, at the way they were sitting together on the floor. A flush of color rose in her pale cheeks. "I am sorry," she said, her voice hoarse from crying. "I should not have. I did not mean to impose on you." "You did not impose," Cole said firmly. "I offered, remember, and I am glad I could be here. You should not have to face this alone." Sarah looked at him, her eyes red-rimmed and exhausted, and something in her expression softened. "Thank you," she whispered. "For staying, for everything. I do not think I would have made it through the night without you." "You are stronger than you think," Cole said, "but everyone needs help sometimes. There is no shame in that." Before Sarah could respond, there was a knock on the door. Cole stood, his body stiff from sitting in one position for so long, and opened it to find Mrs. Henderson with a tray of food and the pastor standing behind her. The older woman's eyes went from Cole to Sarah and back, taking in the scene, but if she had any judgments about the impropriety of a single man spending the night in a widow's room, she kept them to herself. "How are you, dear?" Mrs. Henderson asked, bustling in and setting the tray on the table. "I brought you some breakfast. You need to keep your strength up." Sarah shook her head. "I cannot eat." "You need to try," the pastor said gently. He was an older man with kind eyes and a weathered face. "You have been through an ordeal. Your body needs nourishment." Cole watched as they fussed over Sarah, helping her to the chair, trying to get her to take at least a few bites of bread. She managed a little, more to satisfy them than out of any real appetite. Cole felt suddenly out of place, an intruder on this scene, and he collected his coat from where it had fallen. "I should go," he said quietly. "Let you have some privacy." Sarah looked up at him quickly, something like panic flashing across her face. Will you be at the burial?" Her voice was small, uncertain. Cole had not planned on it. He barely knew her, and funerals were hard for him, bringing back too many memories of standing over graves himself. But looking at her face, at the vulnerability and fear there, he found himself nodding. "If you want me there, I will be there." Relief washed over Sarah's features. "Please, I would like that." Mrs. Henderson gave Cole a grateful look. "The service will be at 10 o'clock up at the cemetery on the hill, just a small gathering." Cole nodded, settling his hat on his head. He met Sarah's eyes one more time, trying to convey without words that she was not alone, that he would keep his promise. Then he slipped out of the room, leaving her to the ministrations of the midwife and the pastor. Outside, the town was coming to life in the early morning light. Cole walked down the main street toward the livery where he had left his horse, his body tired but his mind churning. He had not expected to spend the night holding a grieving widow, had not expected to feel such a pull to protect and comfort her. He barely knew Sarah Whitmore, and yet he felt like he had seen into the depths of her soul last night, had shared something intimate and profound. He retrieved his horse and rode out to the Double J Ranch, a sprawling operation about 5 miles from town. The owner, Jack Brennan, was a distant cousin who had given Cole work when he had nowhere else to go, and Cole had been working there ever since. He was good with horses, patient and skilled, and he had found a measure of peace in the routine of ranch work. By the time he reached the ranch, the other hands were already up and working. Cole quickly tended to his horse, then found Jack in the main barn, overseeing the morning feeding. "Cole," Jack greeted him, a stocky man in his 50s with graying hair and sharp eyes. "Did not expect to see you back so soon. Everything all right?" "I need a few hours this morning," Cole said. "There is a funeral I need to attend." Jack studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Someone you knew, the baby of a woman in town, stillborn. She is alone and someone needs to be there for her." Understanding crossed Jack's face. He knew Cole's history, knew about Mary and Emma. "Take all the time you need. We can manage here." Cole nodded gratefully, then went to clean up and change into his better clothes. By the time he rode back into town, it was nearing 10 o'clock. The cemetery was on a hill overlooking Redemption, a small plot of land with wooden markers and a few stone monuments for those who could afford them. Cole tied his horse to the fence and made his way through the graves to where a small group had gathered. Sarah stood beside a tiny grave, so small it broke Cole's heart to look at it. She wore a black dress that hung loosely on her thin frame, and her face was pale as death itself. Mrs. Henderson stood on one side of her, a young woman Cole did not recognize on the other, but Sarah looked utterly isolated despite their presence, lost in a grief so profound that Cole could feel it from where he stood. He approached quietly, removing his hat as he joined the small circle. Sarah's eyes found his, and he saw something in them shift, some of the desperate loneliness easing just slightly. He gave her a small nod, a silent promise that he was there, that she did not have to face this alone. The pastor began the service, his words about God's plan and eternal rest washing over them. Cole barely heard it, too focused on Sarah, on the way her hands clenched and unclenched at her sides, on the tears that slid silently down her cheeks. The tiny casket that held her daughter was simple pine, and when they lowered it into the ground, Sarah made a sound like a wounded animal. Cole found himself moving before he realized what he was doing, stepping to Sarah's side. She turned to him instinctively, and he took her hand in his, squeezing gently. Her fingers gripped his like a lifeline, and they stood that way as the pastor finished his words, and the first shovelful of dirt hit the casket with a hollow thud that echoed in the morning air. When it was over, when the grave was filled and a simple wooden cross placed at the head, the small group began to disperse. Mrs. Henderson gave Sarah's arm a pat and promised to check on her later. The young woman, who turned out to be another widow from town, offered quiet condolences. Then they were alone, just Cole and Sarah standing by the grave of her daughter. "I named her Rose," Sarah said softly, her voice barely carrying on the wind. "Thomas always said he would plant rose bushes around our house when we built it. I thought it would be a way to keep them both with me." "It is a beautiful name," Cole said, his voice rough with emotion. Sarah stared down at the grave, and Cole could see her struggling, fighting against the urge to simply collapse. He knew that battle, knew how hard it was to keep standing when everything in you wanted to fall. "What do I do now?" Sarah asked, and there was such lost confusion in her voice that Cole's chest ached. "How do I go back to my room, to my life, and just carry on as if nothing happened?" "You do not have to figure it all out right now," Cole said, echoing his words from the night before. "You just have to get through today, and then tomorrow you get through that day, one step at a time." "I feel like I am drowning," Sarah whispered, "like I cannot breathe." Cole understood that feeling all too well. He had felt it after Mary and Emma died, that sensation of being underwater, of the world being muffled and distant and impossible to navigate. "I know," he said simply. "But you are not drowning. You are here, you are breathing, you are surviving." "That is enough for now." Sarah turned to look at him, really look at him, and her eyes were searching, desperate for something to hold on to. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "Why do you care?" Cole thought about his answer for a moment, wanting to be honest. "Because I know what it is to lose everything," he said finally. "And I know how much it helps to have someone who understands, even a little. You do not have to face this alone, Sarah, not if you do not want to." Something in Sarah's expression cracked, the careful composure she had been trying to maintain shattering. "I do not want to be alone," she admitted, her voice breaking. "I am so tired of being alone." "Then you do not have to be," Cole said, and meant it. "I will help you however I can. For as long as you need." Sarah's eyes filled with fresh tears, but she nodded, seeming to take some small comfort from his words. They stood together by the grave for a while longer, neither speaking, just being present with the loss and the grief. Finally, as the sun climbed higher in the sky, Sarah took a deep breath and squared her shoulders. "I should go back," she said. "Mr. Cooper at the mercantile has been kind, letting me take time off, but I cannot take advantage. Will you be all right?" Cole asked, concerned. She looked exhausted, wrung out, barely holding herself together. "I do not know," Sarah admitted. "But I have to try, do not I, like you said, one step at a time." Cole walked her back to town, leading his horse beside them. They did not talk much, but the silence was comfortable rather than awkward. When they reached the mercantile, Sarah paused at the base of the outside stairs that led to her room. "Thank you," she said, looking up at Cole. "For last night, for today, for everything. I do not know how I will ever repay you." "You do not owe me anything," Cole said firmly. "I did not help you expecting repayment. I did it because it was the right thing to do." Sarah studied his face for a long moment, and Cole found himself unable to look away from her dark eyes. Even red-rimmed and exhausted, there was something compelling about her, a quiet strength underneath the grief that he found himself drawn to. "Will I see you again?" Sarah asked, and there was a vulnerability in the question that made Cole's heart clench. "Do you want to?" he asked carefully. "Yes," Sarah said without hesitation. "I think I do." Cole found himself smiling just a little. "Then you will." I come into town most Saturdays for supplies. Maybe I could stop by, see how you are doing." Relief and something that might have been hope crossed Sarah's face. "I would like that," she said softly. They said their goodbyes, and Cole mounted his horse and headed back to the ranch. As he rode, he found his thoughts circling back to Sarah again and again. There was something about her that had gotten under his skin, something beyond just sympathy for her loss. She was brave in a quiet way, facing unimaginable pain and still trying to keep going. He admired that, understood it. The next few days passed in a blur of work. Cole threw himself into his tasks, training horses and mending fences and doing everything he could to keep busy. But at night, when he lay in his bunk in the ranch bunkhouse, he found himself thinking about Sarah, wondering how she was doing, if she was eating, if she was sleeping. He told himself he was just concerned as one human being for another, but there was a pull there he could not quite explain. Saturday seemed to take forever to arrive. Cole finished his morning chores quickly, then cleaned up and headed into town with the excuse of needing supplies. In truth, he could have waited another week, but he had promised Sarah he would check on her, and he was not a man to break his word. He found her in the mercantile, helping a customer select fabric. She looked thinner than she had a few days ago, her face pale and drawn, but she was upright and functioning. When she saw him, something in her expression lightened, a small smile touching her lips. "Cole," she greeted him, and hearing her say his name sent an unexpected warmth through his chest. "I was hoping you would come." "I promised I would," Cole said. "How are you doing?" Sarah's smile faltered slightly. "I am, managing. Some moments are better than others." Cole nodded, understanding what she was not saying. The customer finished her purchase and left, and Cole found himself alone with Sarah in the quiet store. Mr. Cooper, the owner, was in the back room doing inventory. "Have you eaten today?" Cole asked, knowing from experience that grief could steal appetite. Sarah looked down, confirming his suspicion. "I had some coffee this morning." "That is not enough," Cole said gently. "When do you have a break? Let me buy you lunch." Sarah hesitated, and Cole could see the warring emotions on her face. Propriety said she should not be seen having lunch alone with a man she barely knew, but loneliness and the desire for companionship won out. "I can take a break now," she said. "Mr. Cooper would not mind." They walked to the small restaurant on Main Street, a simple establishment run by a Chinese family that served good, hearty food. Cole found them a table in the corner, away from prying eyes, and ordered beef stew for both of them. When it arrived, steaming and fragrant, Sarah stared at it as if not quite sure what to do. "Try to eat something," Cole encouraged. "Even just a little." Sarah picked up her spoon and managed a few bites. Cole could see the effort it took, but he also saw that once she started, her body's need for nourishment took over and she ate more steadily. They talked quietly as they ate, about nothing important, just small things. Cole told her about the ranch, about the horses he was training. Sarah told him about growing up in Missouri, about her parents who had passed from cholera when she was young, about Thomas and how they had met. "He was a dreamer," Sarah said, a sad smile on her face. "Always talking about the future, about all the things we would do and see. I loved that about him, even when it drove me crazy." "Sounds like he was a good man," Cole offered. "He was," Sarah agreed. "Not perfect, but good. I miss him every day." She paused, then added softly, "I thought having the baby would help with that, would give me a piece of him to hold on to. Instead, I just have more loss." Cole reached across the table and covered her hand with his, a gesture of comfort that felt natural despite how recently they had met. "You will always have your memories of him," he said. "No one can take those away." And Rose, even though her life was short, she was real, she mattered. Do not let anyone tell you different. Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back, squeezing Cole's hand gratefully. "Thank you," she whispered, "for understanding. For not telling me to just move on, or that it was God's will, or any of the other things people say when they do not know what else to do." "Those things might be true," Cole said, "but they do not help when you are in the middle of the pain." Sometimes you just need someone to sit with you in it, not try to fix it or explain it away. They finished their meal and Cole walked Sarah back to the mercantile. Before she went inside, she turned to him, her expression uncertain but hopeful. "Will you come again?" she asked. "Next Saturday, I mean." "I will come," Cole promised. "And if you need anything before then, you can send word to the ranch. I will come." Sarah nodded, and for the first time since her baby died, Cole saw something like peace in her eyes. It was fragile and temporary, he knew, but it was there. She went back inside, and Cole collected his supplies and rode back to the ranch, feeling lighter somehow despite the sadness of the situation. The weeks began to fall into a pattern. Every Saturday, Cole would ride into town and spend time with Sarah. Sometimes they would have lunch together. Sometimes they would just walk, talking about everything and nothing. Sarah was slowly coming back to life, the color returning to her cheeks, the depth of her smiles reaching her eyes more often. She still had hard days, days when the grief overwhelmed her, but Cole was there to help her through them, offering a steady presence and an understanding ear. Cole found himself looking forward to Saturdays with an anticipation he had not felt in years. He enjoyed Sarah's company, enjoyed the way her mind worked, the quiet intelligence in her observations, the dry wit that emerged as she began to heal. She was unlike any woman he had known, shaped by loss into someone who understood the darkness but still chose to look for light. The other ranch hands noticed the change in Cole, teasing him gently about the mysterious woman in town who had captured his attention. Cole deflected their questions, but could not deny the truth of them. He was drawn to Sarah in a way that went beyond sympathy or shared grief. He liked her, genuinely liked her, and he was beginning to realize that what he felt was growing into something deeper. One Saturday in late November, nearly 2 months after Rose's death, Cole arrived in town to find Sarah bundled in a thick shawl against the cold. Snow had fallen overnight, blanketing redemption in white, and the world had that muffled, peaceful quality that comes with fresh snow. "Want to go for a walk?" Sarah asked when she saw him, and there was a light in her eyes that made Cole's heart skip. They walked to the edge of town, where the buildings gave way to open land and the mountains rose in the distance. The air was crisp and cold, their breath misting in front of them, but it was beautiful in the stark way of winter. "I have been thinking," Sarah said as they walked, her mittened hand tucked into the crook of Cole's elbow for warmth. "About the future, about what comes next." "And what have you decided?" Cole asked, curious. "That I cannot stay frozen in grief forever," Sarah said. "That Thomas would not have wanted that, and neither would Rose. I will always miss them, always carry them with me, but I need to start living again, not just surviving." Cole felt pride surge through him. He knew how hard it was to reach that conclusion, how much courage it took to choose life after loss. "I think that is wise," he said. "What will you do?" Sarah was quiet for a moment, her brow furrowed in thought. "I do not know exactly. Keep working at the mercantile for now. Maybe eventually save enough to do something else. I used to dream of having my own dress shop making beautiful things. Maybe someday." "I think you would be good at that," Cole said, remembering the careful way she helped customers in the store, her eye for color and fabric. They walked in comfortable silence for a while, and then Sarah stopped, turning to face Cole. Her expression was serious, searching. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Anything," Cole replied. "Why have you kept coming back?" Sarah asked. "I know you said you understood my grief, and I am grateful for that, but it has been weeks now. Most people would have moved on, would have considered their Christian duty done, but you keep showing up, keep spending your free time with a sad widow." "Why?" Cole felt his heart start to pound. He had known this question was coming, had been asking himself the same thing. The truth was complicated, layered, but it deserved to be spoken. "At first, I came because I knew you needed someone who understood," he said carefully. "Because I remembered how terrible it was to face that loss alone, and I did not want that for you. But somewhere along the way, it became about more than that." He paused, gathering his courage. "I kept coming back because I like you, Sarah. I like talking to you, spending time with you." I think about you when I am not here, wonder how you are doing. I look forward to Saturdays in a way I have not looked forward to anything in years." Sarah's eyes had gone wide, her lips parting in surprise. "Cole, I am not asking you for anything," Cole said quickly. "I know you are still grieving, still healing. I just wanted to be honest with you. I care about you more than just as a friend helping a friend." For a long moment, Sarah just stared at him, and Cole braced himself for rejection, for her to say that she was not ready, that she could not think of him that way. But then, slowly, a smile spread across her face, tentative but real. "I am glad," she said softly. "Because I have been having the same thoughts. I did not know if it was too soon, if I was betraying Thomas's memory by having feelings for someone else. But when I am with you, I feel less alone. I feel like myself again, like there might be happiness waiting for me in the future." Cole felt his breath catch. "You are not betraying anyone," he said firmly. "Thomas would want you to be happy. I know I would want that for Mary if our situations were reversed. Love is not finite, Sarah. Having room in your heart for someone new does not mean you loved the people you lost any less." Sarah stepped closer, and Cole found himself reaching out to cup her face in his hands. Her skin was cold from the winter air, but her eyes were warm, looking at him with something that made hope bloom in his chest. "I do not know what I am doing," Sarah admitted. "I do not know how to do this, how to move forward, but I know I want to try, with you if you will have me." "Sarah Whitmore," Cole said, his voice rough with emotion, "I would be honored." He leaned down slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted to, but she did not. Instead, she rose on her toes to meet him halfway, and their lips met in a kiss that was gentle and sweet and full of promise. It was not a kiss of passion or desperate need, but something deeper, something that spoke of understanding and comfort and the possibility of healing together. When they pulled apart, both of them were smiling, their foreheads resting together, their breath mingling in the cold air. Cole felt something settle in his chest, some piece of himself that had been missing since Mary and Emma died clicking back into place. He was not replacing them, would never replace them, but he was allowing himself to love again, to hope again. "We will take this slow," Cole said. "No rushing, no pressure. We will figure it out together as we go." "Together," Sarah echoed, and the words sounded like a promise. The weeks that followed were some of the happiest Cole had known in years. He and Sarah continued their Saturday meetings, but now there was a new dimension to them, a romantic element that added sweetness to everything. They held hands as they walked, stole kisses when they thought no one was looking, talked about their hopes and dreams for the future with a tentative optimism. The town noticed, of course. Small towns always did. There were some disapproving looks, some murmurs about how quickly the widow had moved on, but there were also supporters, people who were happy to see Sarah smile again, who thought Cole was a good man and they made a fine pair. Cole and Sarah ignored the gossip, focusing on each other and on building something real. As winter deepened and Christmas approached, Cole found himself thinking about the future in concrete terms. He had saved some money over the years, enough to maybe buy a small piece of land, build a house. The idea of having a home again, a family, seemed less like an impossible dream and more like something that could actually happen. One Saturday in mid-December, as they sat together in the restaurant over coffee, Cole brought up the subject carefully. "I have been thinking about the future," he said. "About what I want, what kind of life I want to build." Sarah looked at him with interest. "What kind of life do you want?" "I want a home," Cole said simply. "A place of my own with land for horses. I have been working for other people for a long time and it has been good, but I want something that is mine, something I can build and grow." "That sounds wonderful," Sarah said, and there was wistfulness in her voice. "I would love to have a real home again. I have been living above the mercantile for so long, it would be nice to have a place with a kitchen and a garden." Cole took a deep breath, his heart pounding. "What if we built that together?" he asked. "You and me. What if we got married, bought land, made a life?" Sarah's eyes went wide, her coffee cup frozen halfway to her lips. Are you asking me to marry you? I am, Cole said, reaching across the table to take her hand. I know it has not been that long, I know people will say it is too soon, but I love you, Sarah. I love your strength and your kindness and the way you keep going even when everything is hard. I want to build a life with you if you will have me. Sarah set down her coffee cup with a trembling hand, tears shining in her eyes, but they were not tears of sadness. She was smiling, her face radiant with joy. Yes, she said, her voice shaking with emotion. Yes, I will marry you, Cole Brennan. I love you too. I did not think I could feel this way again, but you have shown me that there can be happiness after loss, that life goes on and it can be beautiful. Cole stood up from his chair and pulled Sarah to her feet, kissing her right there in the middle of the restaurant. Let people stare, he thought. Let them talk. He had found something precious, something worth holding on to, and he was not going to hide it. They decided to wait until after the new year to marry, giving Sarah time to mourn properly and to prepare herself for this new chapter. Cole spent his free time looking at land, finding a beautiful piece of property about 3 miles from town with good water and grassland perfect for horses. He made an offer, and when it was accepted, he felt a surge of pride and excitement. This would be their home, his and Sarah's, a place to build their future. On a cold January day in 1877, Cole and Sarah were married in the small church in Redemption. The ceremony was simple, attended by a handful of people including Jack and some of the ranch hands, Mrs. Henderson, and a few townspeople who had become friendly with Sarah. Sarah wore a simple blue dress, the best she owned, and Cole wore his good suit, and when they said their vows, their voices were steady and sure. When the pastor pronounced them husband and wife, Cole kissed Sarah with a gentleness that belied the depth of his feelings. She was his now, and he was hers, and they would face whatever came together. They spent their wedding night in Sarah's room above the mercantile, which would be their home just until Cole could build their house. It was not fancy or particularly romantic, but as Cole held Sarah in his arms, both of them nervous and tender with each other, it felt perfect. They had both loved before, both lost before, and that history informed the way they approached each other now, with care and respect and a deep appreciation for the gift of a second chance. In the weeks and months that followed, Cole and Sarah threw themselves into building their new life. Cole continued working at the Double J Ranch while also spending every spare moment working on their house. Sarah helped when she could, her pregnancy soon making itself known. This time, though, she was not facing it alone. Cole was there for every moment, his hand on her growing belly, his excitement palpable. They built a modest house on their land, 2 bedrooms with a kitchen and a parlor and a wide porch that looked out over the mountains. It was not grand, but it was theirs, built with their own hands and filled with their dreams. They planted rose bushes in the front yard, one for Thomas and one for baby Rose, honoring the past while building the future. Sarah's pregnancy progressed smoothly, and though Cole knew she was terrified, remembering what had happened before, he was there to reassure her, to hold her when the fear became overwhelming. They talked to the doctor frequently, made sure Sarah was resting and eating well, prayed together for a healthy baby. In late September, as the leaves were just beginning to turn gold on the aspens, Sarah went into labor. Cole stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand, encouraging her, his own fear carefully hidden. When the baby finally came, a healthy, squalling boy with dark hair and strong lungs, Cole felt tears stream down his face. Sarah cradled their son, laughing and crying at the same time, overwhelmed with relief and joy. "We did it," she whispered, looking at Cole with wonder. "He is here, he is healthy." "You did it," Cole corrected, kissing her forehead. "You were so strong, I am so proud of you." They named him Thomas Cole, honoring both the man Sarah had loved and lost, and the man who had helped her find her way back to life. Little Thomas was a good baby, healthy and happy, and watching Sarah with him, Cole felt his heart swell with a love so profound it almost hurt. Life settled into a rhythm. Cole worked the land, breeding and training horses with a skill that brought buyers from all over Colorado. Sarah tended their home and their son, but she also began sewing in her spare time, making dresses and shirts that she sold in town. Her dream of a dress shop was still distant, but it no longer felt impossible. 2 years after Thomas was born, Sarah gave birth to a daughter they named Emma Rose, combining the names of the daughters both she and Cole had lost. It felt right, a way of honoring the past while embracing the future. Emma had red hair like Cole's first daughter had, and she had Sarah's dark eyes, and she was perfect. The years passed in a blur of hard work and simple joys. Cole and Sarah built a good life together, not without struggles or hard times, but always facing them together. They never forgot the people they had lost. Thomas Whitmore and baby Rose were remembered, talked about, honored. Mary and Emma Brennan were woven into the fabric of their family story. The children grew up knowing about the siblings they had never met, understanding that love could span loss and that family was more complicated than just blood. On quiet nights, after the children were asleep, Cole and Sarah would sit on their porch, looking out at the land they had built together. Sometimes they talked, sharing their thoughts and dreams. Sometimes they just sat in comfortable silence, Sarah's head on Cole's shoulder, his arm around her waist. "You ever think about that night?" Sarah asked one evening, years after they had first met. "The night Rose died when you sat with me?" "I think about it often," Cole admitted. "It was one of the worst nights of my life to witness, but also one of the most important. I found you that night, found a reason to believe in the future again." "I did not think I would survive that night," Sarah said softly. "I wanted to die, wanted the pain to stop, but you showed me that there was still light in the world, still kindness. You held me together when I was falling apart." "We held each other together," Cole corrected. "That is what we have always done. We helped each other heal, helped each other believe in love again." Sarah turned to look at him, her eyes shining in the moonlight. "I am grateful every day that Mrs. Henderson asked you to check on me. Grateful that you stayed, that you cared, that you loved me enough to help me find my way back." Cole kissed her, slow and sweet, a kiss full of years of shared history and love. "I would do it all again in a heartbeat," he said. "You and our family are the greatest gifts I have ever been given." "I love you, Sarah Brennan." "I love you too," Sarah whispered. "More than I ever thought possible." Years continued to pass, bringing changes and challenges. Young Thomas grew tall and strong, inheriting his mother's kindness and his father's way with horses. Emma was spirited and clever, keeping her parents on their toes. When Thomas was 10 and Emma 8, Sarah gave birth to another son, whom they named Jack after Cole's cousin who had given him work when he needed it most. The house expanded to accommodate their growing family, rooms added on, laughter echoing through the halls. The horse breeding operation Cole had started flourished. His reputation for training gentle, reliable horses spread throughout Colorado and beyond. Men came from as far as Wyoming and New Mexico to buy his stock, and the money allowed Sarah to finally open her dress shop in town. It was a small storefront, but it was hers, and she took pride in every dress she made, every customer she served. The town of Redemption grew as well, transforming from a rough frontier settlement into a proper town with a schoolhouse and a telegraph office and streets that were paved instead of just dirt. Cole and Sarah became respected members of the community, known for their hard work and their kindness. They helped newcomers get established, donated to the church and the school, and always made time for those who were struggling. One spring day, when young Thomas was 16 and talking about courting the daughter of a neighboring rancher, Sarah found herself back on the hill overlooking the town, standing by a small grave marked with a wooden cross. Over the years, they had replaced the cross with a proper stone marker that read Rose Whitmore, beloved daughter, forever in our hearts. Cole came to stand beside her, his arm slipping around her waist in a gesture so familiar it was like breathing. They stood in silence for a while, remembering the tiny girl who had changed both their lives. I wonder sometimes what she would have been like, Sarah said softly. If she would have had Thomas's smile or my eyes, what kind of person she would have grown into. I like to think she is watching over all of us, Cole said. Her and Emma and Mary and Thomas, I like to think they are proud of what we have built. Sarah leaned into her husband's warmth, feeling the solid reality of him beside her. We have been blessed, she said. To have found each other, to have built this life. I never thought, that terrible night when she died, that I could ever be happy again. But you showed me that healing is possible, that love can bloom even in the darkest soil. You saved me too, Cole reminded her. I was just going through the motions before I met you, existing but not really living. You gave me a reason to hope again, to believe that the future could hold joy. They walked back down the hill together, hand in hand, toward the life they had built and the family waiting for them. The past was always with them, woven into who they were, but it no longer defined them. They had taken their losses and their pain and had transformed them into something beautiful, something lasting. That evening, with their children gathered around the dinner table, Cole looked at Sarah across the chaos of family life and felt his heart swell with gratitude. This was what they had fought for, what they had built together from the ashes of their grief. 3 healthy children who were growing into fine young people, a home filled with love and laughter, a partnership that had weathered storms and emerged stronger. After dinner, as was their custom, Cole helped Sarah clean up while the children did their homework. They worked in comfortable rhythm, passing dishes and sharing small observations about their day. When the kitchen was clean and the children were getting ready for bed, Sarah turned to Cole and pulled him close. "Thank you," she said simply. "For what?" Cole asked, puzzled. "For staying that night," Sarah said. "For holding me when I thought I would shatter into pieces, for loving me when I was broken, for helping me believe in tomorrow, for all of this." She gestured around them, encompassing their home, their family, their life. Cole cupped her face in his hands, looking into the dark eyes he had come to know so well. "You never have to thank me for loving you," he said. "It is the easiest thing I have ever done. You are my heart, Sarah, you and our children." Everything good in my life came from that night, from the choice to sit beside you and hold your hand through the darkness. They kissed, a kiss that held years of love and partnership, of joy and sorrow shared and overcome. When they finally pulled apart, both were smiling, their foreheads resting together. "Come on," Cole said, taking her hand. "Let us go say good night to the children." They went upstairs together, stopping first in Jack's room where their youngest was already asleep, his face peaceful in the lamplight. Sarah straightened his blankets and kissed his forehead, and Cole did the same, marveling at how much the boy had grown. Emma's room was next, and they found her curled up with a book, trying to sneak in a few more pages before bed. "Time to sleep, sweetheart," Sarah said gently, taking the book and marking her place. "Just one more chapter," Emma pleaded, but she was already yawning. "Tomorrow," Cole promised. "Sweet dreams," Emma rose. Finally, they stopped at Thomas's room. Their eldest was sitting at his desk writing a letter, and he looked up with a smile when they entered. He was so much like his namesake, Sarah thought, with that same dreamy optimism and kind heart, writing to Alice. Sarah asked with a knowing smile, referring to the girl Thomas was sweet on. Thomas blushed but nodded. "I am asking if she would like to go to the church social next week." "She will say yes," Cole said confidently. "Any girl would be lucky to have you. Just remember to be respectful and honest, and you will do fine." They hugged their son goodnight and left him to finish his letter. Back in their own bedroom, Cole and Sarah got ready for bed, the routine of years making their movements synchronized and easy. When they finally lay down together, Sarah curled into Cole's side the way she had every night since their wedding. "Do you ever miss it?" Sarah asked into the darkness. "The life you had before with Mary and Emma?" It was a question she had asked before over the years, and Cole's answer was always the same. "I miss them," he said honestly. "I will always miss them, always wish I could have saved them, but I do not miss that life because this is the life I have here and now with you." Both things can be true at once. I can love what was and also love what is. I feel the same, Sarah admitted. About Thomas and Rose, I loved them, will always love them, but I also love you and our children with everything I am. It does not diminish what came before to embrace what is now. They lay in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the sounds of their house settling around them, the occasional creak of floorboards, the wind in the trees outside. Finally, Sarah spoke again, her voice drowsy. I am glad you stayed that night, Cole Brennan. I am glad you held me through the dark. I do not know where I would be without you. Probably exactly where you are now, Cole said with gentle honesty, because you are strong enough to have survived it on your own. But I am glad I got to be part of your journey, glad I got to walk beside you through it all. Sarah lifted her head to kiss him one more time, then settled back against his chest, her hand over his heart. Together, she murmured, echoing the word they had spoken years ago in the snow. Together, Cole agreed, holding her close as they drifted off to sleep. The years continued to pass, bringing the inevitable changes that come with time. Young Thomas married his Alice and they settled on land adjacent to Cole and Sarah's, building their own house and starting their own family. Emma grew into a beautiful, headstrong young woman who shocked everyone by deciding to become a teacher rather than simply getting married. Jack followed in his father's footsteps with the horses, showing a natural talent that had Cole beaming with pride. Cole and Sarah grew older together, their hair graying, lines deepening in their faces, but their love remaining constant. They became grandparents, delighting in the babies that young Thomas and Alice brought into the world. They celebrated anniversaries and birthdays, weathered droughts and harsh winters, supported each other through illness and injury. On their 25th wedding anniversary, their children threw them a party at the house. Friends and family from all over the territory came to celebrate, filling the house and yard with laughter and music. At one point in the evening, Cole pulled Sarah outside onto the porch, away from the noise and the crowd, wanting a quiet moment alone with his wife. 25 years, Sarah said wonderingly, looking up at the stars. It seems impossible that it has been that long, and yet I cannot remember a time before you. Best 25 years of my life, Cole said, meaning it absolutely. You know, sometimes I think about that cowboy who rode into town one night to sit with a grieving widow. He had no idea that night would change his entire life. I think about that widow often, Sarah replied. She was so lost, so certain that her life was over. She could not have imagined that sitting beside her in the dark was the man who would become her husband, the father of her children, her partner in everything. Cole turned Sarah to face him, taking both her hands in his. I would not change a single thing, he said. Not the pain, not the loss, not the hard times, because all of it led to this, to you, to our family. It all mattered. It all meant something. I love you, Sarah said, tears shining in her eyes. I have loved you since you sat beside me and held me through the worst night of my life. I will love you until my last breath and beyond. And I love you, Cole replied. You are my heart, my home, my everything. Thank you for choosing me, for building this life with me, for loving me even when I did not think I deserved to be loved again. They kissed under the stars, the sounds of their anniversary celebration drifting out from the house, their children and grandchildren inside, the life they had built surrounding them like a warm blanket. And in that moment, everything felt perfect, complete, exactly as it was meant to be. As they grew older still, Cole and Sarah began to slow down. They handed over more of the daily operations of the ranch to Jack, and Sarah trained Emma to eventually take over the dress shop. They spent their days together, taking slow walks around their property, sitting on the porch in the evenings, visiting with their grandchildren. Their love had deepened and mellowed over the years, becoming something rich and comfortable, a constant presence that needed no words. One evening, as they sat together watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and pink, Sarah reached for Cole's hand. "Do you remember what you told me that first night?" she asked. About the pain not going away but changing, becoming something you could carry. I remember, Cole said. You were right, Sarah said softly. The pain of losing Rose, of losing Thomas, it is still there, but it does not crush me anymore. It is just part of who I am, woven into the fabric of my life alongside all the joy and love. I can carry it now, and it does not stop me from being happy. That is all any of us can do, Cole said. Carry our losses with us, honor the people we have loved, but keep living, keep loving, keep finding reasons to smile. Sarah leaned her head on Cole's shoulder, and they sat in peaceful silence as the sun slipped below the horizon. They had been given a gift, both of them knew that. A second chance at love, at family, at happiness. They had taken that chance and had built something beautiful, something lasting. Cole lived to see his 74th birthday, a good long life for a man in that time and place. He passed peacefully in his sleep, Sarah beside him as she had been for over 30 years. When she woke to find him gone, she felt the grief like a physical blow, but underneath, it was a deep gratitude for the years they had been given, for the love they had shared. Sarah lived another 5 years after Cole passed, years filled with her children and grandchildren and even great-grandchildren. She never remarried, content with the love she had known. On quiet evenings, she would sit on the porch they had built together and talk to Cole as if he were still beside her, telling him about their family, about the new babies and the old stories. When Sarah finally passed, peaceful and surrounded by family, she was laid to rest beside Cole on the hill overlooking Redemption. Their graves were next to the small stone that marked baby Rose's resting place, and nearby were plots where young Thomas and his wife would eventually rest, and Emma and Jack when their times came. It was a family plot, a gathering place where the living came to remember the dead and to feel connected to the past. On Sarah's stone, beneath her name and dates, their children had inscribed a simple phrase: "She was loved and she loved well." On Cole's stone they had written, "He held her through the darkness and walked beside her into the light." The years continued to pass, as years always do. The town of Redemption grew and changed, eventually becoming a small city with paved streets and electricity and automobiles. The house that Cole and Sarah built remained standing, passed down through generations, carefully maintained as a link to the past. Their descendants spread across Colorado and beyond, carrying with them the story of the cowboy who sat beside a grieving widow and loved her through her pain, and the woman who found the strength to love again after losing everything. The story became a family legend, told to children and grandchildren, a reminder that even in the darkest moments there can be hope. That love can bloom in the most unlikely places. That grief, while terrible, does not have to be the end of the story. That sometimes the greatest gifts come wrapped in the darkest packages, if only we have the courage to unwrap them. And in the family cemetery on the hill overlooking what had once been a small frontier town, 3 stones stood together, marking the resting places of Rose, who lived only hours, Cole, who loved deeply and well, and Sarah, who learned that the heart can break and heal again, and that each time it does, it grows a little larger, a little stronger, a little more capable of holding both sorrow and joy. Their story was one of loss and love, of darkness and light, of 2 broken people who found each other and built something beautiful from their shared pain. It was a reminder that we are all more resilient than we know, that love is always possible even after the worst has happened, and that sometimes the greatest act of courage is simply to let someone sit beside you in the dark and hold your hand until morning comes. In the end, that is what Cole and Sarah gave each other. The courage to face another day, the strength to hope again, the permission to love despite the risk of loss. They taught each other that life goes on, that beauty can follow tragedy, that the human heart has an infinite capacity for both grief and joy. Their love story was not perfect or easy. It was built on the foundation of loss and watered with tears. But it was real and true and lasting, a testament to the power of compassion, the importance of showing up for each other, and the transformative nature of love. And though they were gone, their legacy lived on in the children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren who carried their blood and their stories. In the house that still stood, sheltering new generations. In the rose bushes that still bloomed each summer, now ancient and gnarled but still producing flowers. In the horses that still ran on the land they had cleared and fenced. In the dress shop in town that still bore Sarah's name, now run by her great-granddaughter. Most of all, their legacy lived on in the simple truth they had discovered together, that even in our darkest moments we are not alone. That there are always people willing to sit beside us, to hold us through the night, to help us believe that morning will come. That love in all its forms is what makes life worth living, what gives us the strength to endure, what transforms our pain into something we can carry. Cole and Sarah's story was a love story, yes, but it was more than that. It was a story about healing, about resilience, about the fundamental human need for connection. It was about two people who had every reason to give up but chose instead to keep going, to find each other, to build a life together against all odds. And in the end, is that not what all the best love stories are about? Not the easy romance of fairy tales, but the hard-won love of two people who face reality together and choose each other anyway. Who honor their pasts, but do not let those pasts define their futures. Who understand that love is not about forgetting what came before, but about making room for what comes next. Cole and Sarah understood that. They lived that. And in doing so, they created something that outlasted their mortal years. A love that echoed down through the generations. A reminder that even in the wild, hard country of the American West in the 1870s, even in the midst of loss and grief, love could flourish and endure. Their story began with death and darkness, with a stillborn baby and a grieving mother and a cowboy who chose to stay. But it became a story of life and light, of children and grandchildren, of a house built and a legacy created. It became a story of hope triumphant over despair, of love proving stronger than loss. And that, perhaps, is the greatest legacy of all. The knowledge that no matter how dark the night, there is always the possibility of dawn. That grief, while real and valid, does not have to be the final word. That love, in all its complicated, messy, beautiful forms, is what saves us in the end. Cole Brennan sat beside Sarah Whitmore on the worst night of her life, and in doing so, changed both their lives forever. He held her through the darkness and she let him, and together they found their way to the light. Together they built a life, raised a family, created a home. Together they proved that second chances exist, that healing is possible, that love can bloom even in the hardest soil. And in a cemetery on a hill, overlooking a Colorado town that has long since forgotten most of its frontier past, 3 stones stand as a testament to that truth. A tiny stone for a baby girl who never drew breath but whose brief existence changed 2 lives forever. 2 larger stones for the man and woman who loved her, mourned her, honored her, and then chose to keep living, keep loving, keep hoping. In the end, their story was simple. She was grieving her stillborn baby alone. The cowboy sat beside her and held her through the night. And from that single act of compassion, from that choice to not let someone suffer in isolation, grew a love that spanned decades, a family that spread across generations, and a legacy that would endure long after they were both gone. It was, in every sense, a love story for the ages. Not because it was easy or perfect, but because it was real. Because it honored the complexity of human emotion, the reality of loss, and the incredible resilience of the human heart. Because it showed that love can exist alongside grief, that happiness can follow tragedy, that the end of one story can be the beginning of another. And so the story ends where it began, with loss and love intertwined, with darkness giving way to light, with 2 souls finding each other in the midst of pain, and choosing to walk the rest of their journey together. It is a story that reminds us that we are never truly alone, that compassion matters, that showing up for each other in our darkest moments is perhaps the most important thing we can do. Cole and Sarah's love story was written in the hard country of the Colorado frontier, but its lessons are universal and timeless. Love deeply. Grieve honestly. Hold each other through the darkness. And always, always believe that morning will come. That was their gift to each other, and through their story, their gift to all of us. The knowledge that no matter how deep the darkness, there is always light waiting on the other side. We just have to hold on long enough to see it, and sometimes we need someone to hold us while we wait. Cole held Sarah, Sarah held Cole, and together they found their way home.